Kindness is often regarded as a noble quality, a cornerstone of society built on cooperation and mutual respect. We tend to believe that when we treat others with kindness, they will respond in kind. Yet, this very belief, this comforting notion that kindness is inherently good, can become perilous in certain situations. When you offer kindness to a narcissist, you are not nurturing goodwill. Instead, you are providing them with a weapon, one they will wield without hesitation. A narcissist does not perceive kindness as a healthy person would. For someone emotionally stable, kindness is an invitation to forge a connection, a sign of trust and empathy. But for a narcissist, kindness is merely a means to an end, a signal that you are vulnerable and can be exploited, that your goodwill can be twisted to serve their interests. When you exhibit patience in the face of their cruelty, they do not think, "This person is compassionate." Rather, they think, "Perfect. I can push my limits further without fear." If you choose to forgive them after they inflict pain, they do not feel remorse. Instead, they feel empowered, aware that their actions will go unpunished. This is why being kind to a narcissist is not only futile, it is deeply damaging. It reinforces their inflated sense of superiority, their conviction that they can take without giving, that they can hurt without facing any real consequences. And in the end, kindness can become a source of sorrow, leaving you feeling more isolated and hurt than before. Each time you meet their cruelty with kindness, you inadvertently endorse their behavior. You signal to them that the usual rules don't apply, allowing them to manipulate and exploit without fear of consequence. The more they succeed, the bolder they become. Picture it like this: imagine encountering a predator in the wild. You wouldn't approach a wolf with open arms, hoping it would become a loyal companion. You wouldn't try to calm a lion with soft words while it bares its teeth. Nature doesn't function that way, and neither does human psychology. A narcissist doesn't respect kindness because, at their core, they don't view you as an equal. To them, you are merely a resource, something to be used for their own gain. Your feelings, your empathy, your capacity to forgive, these are just tools for them to wield in order to maintain their grip on you. This is where many people stumble. They believe that if they keep showing kindness, if they remain patient and understanding, they will eventually reach the humanity buried within the narcissist. They cling to the hope that there's a good person inside, waiting for the right kind of love to emerge. But this is a dangerous illusion, for narcissists do not share the same emotional landscape as you. They do not seek connection in the way you yearn for it. It's a heartbreaking realization that kindness alone cannot bridge the chasm between you. They do not appreciate relationships for their depth or significance. Instead, they value them for what they can gain. Therefore, when you counter their hostility with kindness, you are not helping them. You are not leading them towards self-awareness. You are actually supporting the very mechanism that keeps them ensnared in their dysfunction. You are allowing them to persist in their harmful behavior, not only towards you, but also towards everyone they meet. A narcissist who is never held accountable and who has not faced strong resistance will only become more aggressive. The only way to disrupt this cycle is to understand that kindness is not always the solution. There are moments when being nice is not a virtue, but a liability. In certain situations, the appropriate response is not patience, but establishing firm boundaries, where the right action is not forgiveness, but creating distance, and where the most effective thing you can do is not to give them another opportunity, but to disengage entirely. This shift can be challenging for those who value kindness and believe in the inherent goodness of people. At first, this may feel uncomfortable. It might seem like you're betraying your own principles. However, genuine kindness, true, meaningful kindness, does not mean allowing yourself to be walked all over. It doesn't involve putting up with mistreatment under the pretense of compassion. It's about recognizing when to step away, when to safeguard your well-being, and when to assert that enough is enough. The reality of interacting with a narcissist is that the more kindness you extend, the more they will exploit it. The only way to halt their behavior is by refusing to engage in their manipulative games, by no longer giving them the benefit of the doubt, by stopping them from using your goodwill as a means to gain power, and by finally understanding that being nice to a narcissist can cost you your self-respect. One of the most deceptive traps you can fall into when dealing with a narcissist is the belief that your kindness will somehow alter the situation, that if you are patient, compassionate, or understanding enough, they will eventually recognize your value and treat you with the respect you deserve. Unfortunately, this is not how narcissists operate. Kindness does not foster goodwill. It keeps you ensnared in a relentless cycle of abuse. Relationships with narcissists, whether they are romantic, familial, professional, or social, tend to follow a disturbingly predictable trajectory, starting with idealization. The narcissist lavishes you with attention, compliments, and charm, making you feel acknowledged, appreciated, and even admired. They elevate you not out of genuine admiration, but to gauge how susceptible you are to their manipulation. The more you invest in the relationship, the more control they gain. Then, almost inevitably, the transition occurs. The devaluation phase starts subtly. You begin to notice minor criticisms, passive-aggressive comments, or abrupt changes in their mood. The warmth they once displayed becomes frigid, replaced by indifference or disdain. This is where your kindness becomes your vulnerability. Instead of recognizing the pattern as a deliberate control tactic, you assume their behavior is a response to something you did wrong. Consequently, you try harder. You become even more understanding and patient, believing that if you can just demonstrate your loyalty, they will revert to their former self. But this is exactly what they anticipate. They depend on your desire for harmony, your belief that relationships should be cultivated, and your reluctance to abandon those who appear to be struggling. Thus, they keep you engaged, providing just enough validation to keep you invested, and just enough moments of warmth to make you think things can return to how they once were. Fueled by your reluctance to distance yourself from those who appear to be in distress, they keep you engaged, providing just enough validation to keep you invested, and fleeting moments of affection to convince you that things can return to their previous state. Each time you forgive them or offer another opportunity, you reinforce their sense of power. You teach them that they can perpetuate this cycle endlessly, that regardless of how much they hurt you, you will always return. This is why being kind to a narcissist does not disrupt the cycle. It actually reinforces it. Narcissists do not react to kindness with appreciation. Instead, they respond with a sense of entitlement. The more compassionate you are, the more they will demand. The more opportunities you extend to them, the less they will value you. They are not interested in shared growth, compromise, or resolving issues in a constructive manner. Their focus is on control, ensuring that you remain emotionally tied to them while they dictate the dynamics of the relationship. As soon as you start to withdraw, they can sense their loss of control and will do anything necessary to regain it. This may manifest as love bombing, where they suddenly overwhelm you with affection, apologies, and grand promises of change. Alternatively, it can take the form of playing the victim. They may cry, manipulate you with guilt, or present themselves as the injured party to make you feel responsible for their emotional state. If none of that works, they will turn to outright hostility, gaslighting, or smear campaigns to punish you for having the audacity to stand up for yourself. The only way to truly escape is to recognize the cycle for what it is, to understand that no amount of kindness, patience, or understanding will ever suffice. That the issue was never your lack of effort, but their unwillingness to treat you with their triumphs of that from genuine respect. The moment you truly grasp this, everything shifts. You cease seeking validation from someone who will never provide it. You stop tiptoeing around, trying to avert the next explosion. You stop engaging in a game that was rigged for your defeat. This is where the real struggle begins, because breaking free from a narcissist is not merely about leaving physically. It's about reclaiming your own mind. It's about unlearning the painful belief that love and suffering must coexist, that loyalty demands self-sacrifice, that your worth hinges on someone else's approval. It's about realizing that true strength doesn't stem from endless endurance, but from the courage to say enough, to walk away not with resentment, but with the quiet assurance of someone who recognizes their own value. Yet, the harsh reality is that narcissists do not easily let go. They will attempt to pull you back in, testing whether you are truly finished. At that moment, you will need to decide, will you revert to the cycle, hoping for a different outcome this time, or will you finally acknowledge that being kind to a narcissist is not an expression of love, but rather a betrayal of yourself? One of the most perilous misconceptions when dealing with a narcissist is the belief that by showing them enough empathy and kindness, they will eventually comprehend your pain. If you can make them aware of how much they are hurting you, they will miraculously feel remorse, recognize the harm they've inflicted, and alter their behavior. However, this belief stems from a fundamental misunderstanding of human nature, particularly regarding the narcissistic mindset. Empathy requires reciprocity. It operates on the premise that both individuals can recognize and appreciate each other's emotional experiences. In a healthy relationship, this mutual understanding fosters respect, comprehension, and personal growth. When one person inflicts harm, they genuinely feel remorse because they can mentally and emotionally empathize with the other's situation. They feel guilt, acknowledge the harm they've caused, and attempt to make reparations. However, with a narcissist, this process is fundamentally flawed. Their ability to genuinely empathize is either greatly diminished or completely absent. When you try to appeal to their compassion, you are merely giving them more insight into how to manipulate you. They do not perceive your pain as something to be avoided for moral reasons. Instead, they see it as a demonstration of their power. Your distress serves as evidence of their control over you, showing that they can manipulate your emotions, push you to your limits, and still draw you back in. If they do express remorse, it is insincere. It is a calculated act meant to keep you involved in their game. This is what makes interacting with a narcissist particularly exasperating. You operate under the belief that they adhere to the same emotional principles as you, that there must be a part of them that desires to improve and be better. But the stark truth is this: they do not view relationships as you do. They do not regard people as equals or as independent beings with their own needs and boundaries. Instead, they see individuals as resources, extensions of their ego, and tools for validation, control, and emotional sustenance. Therefore, when you attempt to appeal to their empathy, you are speaking a language they simply do not comprehend. They grasp the situation, but not in the way you might hope. Rather than showing empathy, they approach it with cold calculation. They gauge how much you can withstand. They push your limits to see when you will finally shatter. Once they identify your breaking point, they will exploit it time and again. This is why attempting to reason with a narcissist is ultimately futile. You cannot use logic to change someone who never relied on it to form their beliefs. You cannot appeal to a conscience that operates in a way you cannot comprehend. This is where many find themselves ensnared, clinging to the hope that if they can just articulate their feelings more clearly, if they can frame their suffering in a way that resonates with the narcissist, then perhaps things will shift, but they never do. The only thing that truly changes is your own sense of weariness, as each effort to make a narcissist understand your viewpoint only drains you further in a fight you cannot win. You are granting them more chances to manipulate you, to deflect blame, to distort your words until you begin to doubt your own reality. The longer you remain trapped in this cycle, the more difficult it becomes to envision and escape. You are exhausting yourself in a struggle that is ultimately unwinnable. You are allowing them more chances to manipulate you, to deflect responsibility, and to distort your words until you begin to doubt your own reality. The longer you remain trapped in this pattern, the more difficult it becomes to find a way out. So what should you do instead? You cease trying to make them comprehend. You stop waiting for them to show concern. You abandon the hope that one day they will transform into the person you always believed they could be. Instead, you accept the situation as it is, rather than how you wish it to be. You acknowledge that the only emotions you can control are your own, and that your energy, empathy, and kindness should be directed towards those who can reciprocate. This realization is not easy. It requires you to relinquish the hope that things will change. It compels you to mourn the belief that if you love them enough, they would eventually alter their behavior. However, once you achieve this, once you stop investing in an illusion, you gain something far more precious: your freedom. The freedom to stop justifying yourself. The freedom to stop seeking approval from someone who cannot provide it. The freedom to walk away, not because you no longer care, but because you finally recognize that your care was never the issue. And that is the key takeaway. Empathy is a gift, but it should only be given to those who truly deserve it. When placed in the hands of the wrong individual, your kindness can turn into a weapon wielded against you. The harsh truth is that to shield yourself, you must accept that not everyone deserves your compassion. Some individuals don't seek your understanding, they crave your absence. One of the most painful errors you can make when confronting a narcissist is to believe that merely establishing boundaries will earn their respect. You might think that if you clearly express your needs and assert yourself appropriately, they will retreat and treat you with the dignity you deserve. But this is a cruel illusion. Boundaries do not operate in the same way with a narcissist as they do with someone reasonable. A reasonable person may not always agree with your boundaries, yet they will acknowledge them, understanding that mutual respect is essential for any healthy relationship. In stark contrast, a narcissist perceives boundaries not as a vital aspect of human connection, but as a challenge to be disregarded, tested, or twisted to fulfill their own desires. This is where many find themselves ensnared. They mistakenly believe that setting a boundary signifies the conclusion of the struggle, when in truth, with a narcissist, it marks merely the beginning of a relentless conflict. A conflict they are resolutely determined to win. To them, boundaries are not a safeguard, they are an affront. They serve as a painful reminder that you are not completely under their influence, that you possess the courage to think independently, to establish your own boundaries, and to resist fully submitting to their desires. This is unbearable for a narcissist, as their entire sense of power hinges on their ability to control the emotional environment of those around them. So, what do? They test your resolve. They push and prod, seeking ways to subtly or overtly breach the very limits you've just set. If you say, "I don't want to discuss that," they will find a way to bring it up again, as if your feelings don't matter. If you express a need for space, they suddenly demand your attention, using guilt or affection to manipulate you into compliance. And when you don't respond as they wish, they escalate their tactics, sulking or lashing out, portraying themselves as the victim to make you feel unreasonable. This is the essence of how narcissists operate. They don't engage fairly, they have no interest in compromise, and they lack any genuine investment in mutual respect. It's a lonely battle, one that leaves you questioning your own worth and sanity. What they seek is control, and as soon as they sense that control diminishing, they will go to great lengths to regain their dominance. This is why, when dealing with a narcissist, simply establishing boundaries is insufficient. Mere words won't deter them. The only effective measure is action, because fundamentally, a boundary is defined not by what you say, but by what you do. If you set a boundary and then immediately retract it when challenged, you teach them that your words hold no weight, that all they need to do is push hard enough and long enough for you to relent. Once they grasp this, they will exploit it repeatedly, conditioning you to doubt your own limits and to question whether you even have the right to refuse. Therefore, the crucial question is not whether you can establish a boundary, but whether you can uphold it, whether you can withstand the discomfort of their response, and whether you are prepared to face their anger, their silent treatment, guilt tripping, and their threats of abandonment, because that is what it requires. Narcissists are not quick to relinquish control, and they will retaliate for any attempts to reclaim it. However, this is where you must remain resolute, because the moment you prioritize their reaction over your own well-being, you have already lost. Reclaiming your power is an arduous journey, fraught with the pain of enduring their disapproval. It demands that you accept their anger not as a sign of your faults, but as a reflection of their inability to control you. You must learn to stop justifying your choices, to cease your quest for their understanding, and to abandon the hope that if you articulate your feelings just right, they might finally honor your boundaries. They won't, not because your limits are unreasonable, but because acknowledging them would mean recognizing you as an independent individual, something a narcissist cannot bear. So, you withdraw from the argument, you stop defending yourself, you refuse to react to their provocations. For the moment you do, you've stepped back into their game. Instead, you take action. If they breach your boundary, you leave the conversation, you walk away, you limit your contact, and if necessary, you extricate yourself from the entire dynamic. For that is the only language they comprehend, not words or explanations, but consequences. This is the most challenging aspect for those who have been taught that relationships thrive on understanding and compromise. They grapple with the painful truth that sometimes the only way to preserve your dignity is to completely disengage. But this isn't about being unkind. It's about honoring yourself. It's about realizing that some individuals respond to kindness not with appreciation, but with manipulation. Your role is not to mend their fractured psyche or to persuade them to treat you with decency. It is simply to determine what you will endure and what you will not, then act upon that decision. In the end, a narcissist will never genuinely honor your boundaries, but they can learn to fear the repercussions of crossing them. The moment you cease to let their reactions dictate your actions, you have already claimed victory. One of the most sinister elements of engaging with a narcissist is their ability to warp reality, not just in the world around you, but deep within the recesses of your own mind. They don't merely manipulate your actions, they twist your perception of yourself, of them, and of the very essence of your relationship. If you remain oblivious to this treachery, you may find yourself ensnared in an invisible prison, one that leads you to doubt your instincts, your memories, and even your self-worth. This manipulation is so effective because narcissists are experts in psychological warfare. They do not need brute force. They thrive on subtlety, gradually eroding your confidence. It starts with minor slights, dismissive remarks, veiled criticisms, masquerading as humor, and shifting blame onto you for their own misdeeds. They condition you to accept their distorted narrative, their twisted interpretation of reality, and over time, you begin to internalize their darkness. You begin to wonder, am I overreacting? Am I the one at fault? Once that doubt takes hold, it expands. It establishes roots in your mind, causing you to view everything through their perspective. You find yourself constantly second-guessing your thoughts. You hesitate to express your needs, fearing you might come across as overly sensitive or demanding. You start rationalizing their actions, creating excuses for their treatment of you, and the more you do this, the more your sense of self diminishes. Eventually, you wake up one day and realize you no longer recognize who you once were. This is what makes it so challenging to break free from a narcissist. It's not just about leaving them physically, but also about reclaiming your own mind. It involves reversing the damage done to your self-perception, instincts, and your right to assert your own reality. This is where many people struggle. They may leave the narcissist, but the narcissist's influence remains in their thoughts. The voice of doubt, self-blame, and emotional turmoil persists long after the relationship has ended. So, how do you liberate yourself? You begin by acknowledging the nature of the manipulation. You realize that the confusion you experience is not a flaw in your reasoning, but a result of their conditioning. Once you recognize this, you can start to dismantle the false narratives they impose on you. You delve into the shadows of your own beliefs. I'm not worthy. I'm too fragile. I always ruin everything. Then a chilling question creeps in, whose voice echoes in my mind? More often than not, these haunting thoughts did not spring from your own essence. They were insidiously implanted, repeated until they felt like a part of you, but they are not. They are twisted echoes meant to keep you confined, to sow seeds of doubt, to render you easier to manipulate. Once you unearth this truth, you can begin to cast them aside. Yet, this is no simple task. It demands time and a fierce resolve. You must cultivate a new awareness, one that sharpens your perception of your own thoughts, allowing you to discern reality from mere conditioning. The key lies in rekindling your intuition, that deep-seated sense of truth within you. Or one of the most profound losses inflicted by a narcissist is the erosion of trust in yourself. You have been conditioned to question your instincts, to doubt your emotions, but the reality is, those instincts were never flawed. When something felt amiss, it was because it was. When you sensed manipulation lurking in the shadows, it was indeed happening. The only true error was learning to silence those feelings. So, you begin to listen to the whispers of your own soul once more. You practice trusting your gut, even when it feels foreign and unsettling. You remind yourself that your feelings are legitimate, that your viewpoint is important, and that you don't need outside approval to understand what is true. The more you practice this, the more you start to restore the confidence that was taken from you. This is what genuine liberation from a narcissist entails. It's not just about escaping their external control. It's also about freeing yourself from their internal influence. It involves reclaiming your own thoughts, your identity, and your ability to define your own reality. Once you achieve this, they lose all authority over you. The one thing a narcissist fears most is someone who sees through their facade. Someone who can no longer be swayed, who no longer seeks their validation, and who no longer succumbs to their manipulations. That is the ultimate triumph. Not just moving on from them, but also shedding the part of yourself that ever accepted their falsehoods. The instant you take back your mind, you regain your power. And once that happens, there is nothing they can do to take it away from you again. A significant psychological transformation occurs when you finally choose to stop adhering to a narcissist's rules. It is the moment you come to understand that your energy, your focus, and your very being no longer have to center around them. That you are not bound to manage their feelings, soothe their insecurities, or maintain harmony at the expense of your own peace of mind. This realization brings with it a bittersweet sense of freedom, tinged with fear, because for so long they have conditioned you to think that their approval, or at least their indifference, was essential for your very existence. But it isn't. It never was. And once you embrace that truth, everything shifts. The final step in reclaiming your strength from a narcissist is detachment. Not merely in terms of physical space, though that is often necessary, but also in emotional and psychological terms. It means being able to witness their actions without being ensnared. To hear their words without reacting, to recognize their manipulation for what it truly is, and to remain untouched. At the heart of every narcissistic interaction lies a familiar pattern they provoke, and you respond. They bait you, and you take the bait. They wield control not through force, but by drawing out reactions, guilt, anger, self-doubt, a desperate longing for their validation. The weight of this realization can be heavy, as it underscores the years lost in a cycle of dependency and emotional turmoil. They revel in your reactions, for it signifies their grip on your soul. But what transpires when you cease to react? When you no longer justify your existence, defend your essence, or seek their understanding? What unfolds when you reject the ceaseless cycle of conflict and contrition, of blame and self-doubt? The entire edifice of the relationship crumbles, for without your engagement, without your emotional tether, they are left with nothing to manipulate. Yet, detachment is not the same as indifference. It does not mean burying your feelings or feigning apathy. It is about redirecting your focus from the narcissist back to your own shadowed self. For far too long, they have ensnared you into prioritizing their whims, what they think, what they desire, how they feel, and this is the very chain that binds you. Even after you sever ties, their presence lingers in the dark corners of your mind. You replay their words, dissect their actions, and seek to unravel the enigma of their cruelty. This is the ultimate snare, the delusion that understanding them will grant you liberation. But that is not freedom, it is merely another form of imprisonment. The harsh truth is, you do not need to comprehend them any further than you already do. You do not require closure, an apology, or even a whisper of acknowledgement for the wounds they have inflicted. Embrace the silence, for it is in that void that you may finally find your own voice. You don't need them to transform. What you truly require is to declare, once and for all, that their grip on you ends now. Not when they confess their wrongs, not when they face the repercussions of their deeds, not when they finally offer you the validation you've long been denied, but now. And that is where the real struggle begins. For detachment is not merely a single choice. It is a relentless practice. It is the daily, moment-by-moment decision to cease nourishing the toxic dynamic that ensnares you. It is catching yourself as you spiral into thoughts of them, and redirecting your focus to something meaningful in your own life. Even as shadows loom. It is resisting the insidious urge to stalk their social media, to pry into mutual friends about their lives, to replay past conversations like a haunting echo. It is reminding yourself, each time they attempt to drag you back into their web, through guilt, through provocation, through orchestrated crisis, that their chaos is no longer your burden. This is no easy feat. It will feel foreign at first, as your very being has been conditioned to respond to their turmoil. For far too long, their emotional storms dictated your own, and now you must learn an entirely new existence. One where your tranquility is no longer shackled to their whims, their moods, or their actions. But with each practice, you grow stronger. You begin to understand that the power they wielded over you was never genuine. It was merely the power you relinquished to them. Embrace the darkness, for it is there that you will find your truth. When you finally stop offering it, they are left with nothing. This is the heartbreaking reality, and narcissists can only control you if you allow it. You start to understand that the influence they held over you was never genuine. It was merely the power you bestowed upon them. Once you cease to give it, they are stripped of everything. This is the painful truth. A narcissist cannot manipulate you without your consent. They cannot instill doubt in you if you hold on to your own truth more firmly than their twisted perceptions. The instant you truly grasp this, you find your freedom. Yet, it's a bittersweet realization. For the power they wielded was never truly theirs. It was always yours to reclaim, and now, as you take it back, you can't help but feel a sense of loss for the time spent under their shadow.